Hello, my lovely friends. It's Emma here from Just a Girl Who Loves Elvis. So today I wanted to talk about something a little different. Not the legend, not the image, not the headlines. I want to talk about home. Because when I think about Elvis, I don't just think about musical fame. I think about longing. I think about roots. I think about comfort. I think about belonging. And I think a lot of people connect to him. Not just because of what he did, but because of what he represented. Something familiar, something safe, something that felt like home. Even if they never met him. And today, I want to explore that. Home isn't just a place. It's a feeling. It's where you feel understood, where you can exhale, where you don't have to perform, where you don't have to explain yourself. For some people, home is a house. For some it's a person. For some it's a memory. For some it's a song. And I think for many people, Elvis became a kind of emotional home. When you look at Elvis's life, there's this quiet thread running through it. The idea of wanting somewhere to belong. Not just physically, but emotionally. Somewhere that felt steady. Somewhere that felt safe. Somewhere that felt like he could just be. And I don't think that ever really left him. No matter how famous he became. Because fame doesn't replace home. It just changes where you look for it. I think people felt that longing in him, even if they couldn't explain it. They felt that softness, that searching, that emotional openness. And I think that's why so many people say things like, he feels so familiar. He feels comforting. He feels safe. He feels like someone I've always known. And that doesn't happen by accident. That happens when someone carries a certain emotional frequency. There's a certain kind of comfort that doesn't come from knowing someone personally. It comes from recognising something in them. A gentleness, a softness, a way of moving through the world. And I think a lot of people felt that with Elvis. Not because he knew him, but because he felt familiar. Like someone you'd known in another life. Like someone you could trust. Like someone who could sit quietly with you, if you needed it. That kind of connection isn't logical. It's emotional. Some people don't just enter your life. They settle into it. They don't make noise. They don't demand. They don't overwhelm. They just exist in a way that feels grounding. And I think Elvis had that quality. Even through a screen, even through a song, even through a photograph. There was something in him that felt steady. And in a world that can feel chaotic, I think that matters more than we realise. I think one of the reasons Elvis connected so deeply with people is because he didn't feel threatening. Not emotionally, not energetically. He felt safe. And safety is one of the most powerful things a human being can offer. It doesn't mean perfect. It doesn't mean flawless. It means gentle. It means you don't feel judged. You don't feel rushed. You don't feel like you have to be someone else. And I think people sense that in him. Nostalgia isn't about the past. It's about how the past made us feel. Safe, loved, seen, held. And Elvis became a part of a lot of people's emotional memories. He became the soundtrack to family kitchens, car rides, living rooms, quiet evenings and lonely nights. So when people hear his voice, they're not just hearing a song, they're remembering a feeling. I think music doesn't just entertain us, it shelters us. It holds us when we don't know what else to do. It sits with us when words fail. It becomes a kind of emotional furniture. And for many people, Elvis's music became that. Something familiar, something steady, something that didn't leave. Every human being is looking for somewhere to belong. Not just socially, emotionally. Somewhere we don't feel strange. Somewhere we don't feel too much. Somewhere we don't feel like we have to shrink. And I think a lot of people found that feeling through Elvis. Not because he tried to be anything, but because he was. No matter how far we go in life, we never really leave our roots behind. They live in how we respond to people, how we look for comfort, how we handle change, how we love. Roots aren't just where you're from, they're how you feel. And I think Elvis carried his roots with him everywhere. Not in a showy way, not in a sentimental way, but in a quiet, constant way. Like an emotional compass. I think one of the things that makes Elvis feel so human to people is that he never stopped feeling like someone's son. Not a star, not a product, not a legend. A son. And I think there's something very tender about that. About knowing that before the fame, before the world, before the expectations, he belonged to a family. He was held. He was worried about. He was loved. And I think people feel that, even now. I think one of the reasons we still feel so protective of Elvis is because he didn't feel untouchable. He felt reachable. Not physically, emotionally. Like someone who could be hurt. Like someone who could be misunderstood. Like someone who needed care. And that doesn't come from weakness. That comes from humanity. And when people sense that in someone, they don't want to tear them down. They want to look after and protect them. Families don't just shape who we are. They shape how we see the world. They teach us what love feels like, what safety feels like, what conflict feels like, what home feels like. And I think Elvis carried those early emotional lessons with him, even as everything around him changed. That kind of emotional memory doesn't disappear. It becomes part of your nervous system. Now, there's a strange thing that happens sometimes. You feel like you know someone, even when you don't. Not because you've met them, but because they feel familiar. Like someone from your past, like someone from your childhood, like someone who made you feel safe. And I think Elvis had that quality. Not in a mystical way, in a very human one. Now, this is something I think we don't talk about enough. Gentle men matter. Men who aren't hardened, men who aren't emotionally armoured, men who are soft without apology. And Elvis Presley represented that for a lot of people. And I think that's one of the reasons he still resonates. Because I think gentleness is timeless. So many of us carry a quiet longing from childhood. Not always for something specific, just for a feeling. The feeling of being held, of being safe, of being understood, of being allowed to be exactly who you are. And I don't think that longing And I think that longing doesn't disappear when we grow up. It becomes quieter, more subtle, and sometimes it finds strange ways to express itself. Through music, through voices, through people we've never met. I think for a lot of people, Elvis became a place where that longing could rest. Not because he promised anything, but because he felt safe. There are some people who don't just exist in your life. They become part of your emotional background. Like a familiar lamp, or a chair you always sit in, or a song that always plays when you're young. They're just there. And Elvis Presley became that for a lot of people. Not as a star, but as a presence. Something steady, something known, something that didn't change. I think one of the most beautiful things about Elvis is how personal people's connections to him are. Everyone has a different reason. A memory, a person, a moment, a feeling. Some people remember him playing in their parents' kitchen. Some remember him on long car rides. Some remember him during lonely nights. Some remember him during happy ones. He has become woven into our lives, not as a celebrity, but as part of our story. When people say, Elvis reminds me of my mum, or Elvis reminds me of my dad, or Elvis reminds me of home, they're not talking about him. They're talking about themselves, their memories, their love, their losses, their safety. And Elvis just held those memories like a container. And that's a rare thing. Trends fade, fame fades, but emotional meaning doesn't. When someone becomes part of your emotional history, they don't leave. They become part of how you remember, part of how you feel, part of how you understand yourself. And I think that's why Elvis is still here. Not because of charts, but because of hearts. Now, there's a difference between liking someone and claiming them emotionally. When people say, he was ours, that doesn't mean possession. That means belonging. They mean he became part of their emotional world, part of their home. And Elvis did that for so many of us. Not because he tried to, but because he felt familiar. Now, a lot of people don't discover Elvis on their own. They're introduced by a parent, by a grandparent, by a sibling, by someone they loved. And that changes everything. Because suddenly Elvis isn't just music. He's memory, he's connection, he's family. He becomes tied to people, not just songs. And once that happens, he's not going anywhere. Some people carry a warmth that makes them feel like they belong in your life. Not logically, emotionally. They don't feel like strangers. They feel like someone you already knew. And I think Elvis had that quality. Not flashy familiarity, quiet familiarity. The kind that settles into you. Now, have you ever noticed how people talk about Elvis? Not like someone from history, but like someone they knew. Like someone they missed. Like someone who mattered. And that doesn't happen when a connection is shallow. That happens when someone becomes part of your emotional world. I think for a lot of us, Elvis wasn't just music. He was a feeling, a warmth, a steadiness, a sense of being okay. Something that didn't change even when everything else did. And I think that's what home really is. Not walls, not furniture, but a feeling of safety. I think this matters still, because in a world that moves very fast, changes very quickly, and often feels very loud, people look for something familiar, something steady, something gentle. And I think that's why Elvis still feels like home to so many. Not because of nostalgia, but because of emotional truth. So when people ask me why Elvis still matters, this is why. Not because of fame, not because of legend, not because of history, but because he became part of people's lives, part of their memories, part of their families, part of their emotional world. And when someone becomes that, they don't really leave. They just live quietly inside us. If this episode made you think of a memory, or a person, or a feeling that once felt like home, then I'm really glad you're here. And if this kind of space feels comforting to you, you're always welcome. You can like, subscribe and share, but only if you want to. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and always keep a little Elvis magic in your heart. I'll see you again soon.